Welcome and thank you for joining us today for a presentation and discussion hosted by the Workforce Development Council of Seattle-King County on our Guaranteed Basic Income Program. My name is Marisol Tapia-Hopper, and I am the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Funding at the WDC. Joining me today are Ganendra Suba, our esteemed Program Manager at the WDC and the driving force behind this work, and Liz Moore, who led the evaluation of our pilot. We have, and if we can move to the next slide, we have organized today's presentation into three parts primarily. So I'll start with a brief overview of how this pilot was born. Then my colleague Anandra will dive into the insights of how we implemented the GBI program. And then we will give the floor to Liz, who will guide us through the evaluation findings and share stories of individuals whose lives have been positively impacted by Guaranteed Basic Income. And if we go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit about the WDC and our work. So the work of the WDC is deeply rooted in our mission, which is to catalyze systems change to increase the prosperity and economic growth of workers, employers, and communities, and to ensure racial equity. The WDC is one of 12 of local workforce boards in Washington State, and as a nonprofit organization, we are committed to taking, proactive steps to address systemic disparities in our region and to advance an equitable and racially inclusive workforce. And as a workforce board, we are leveraging our influence within the regional workforce system to pioneer innovative initiatives like our GBI pilot. So we're very grateful to have you join us for this webinar today and appreciate the opportunity to share the impact of this work with all of you. So I'll start by sharing a little bit about how this project was born, so we can go into the next slide. So the genesis of the Economic Security for All program traces back to 2017 with the creation of Governor Inslee's Poverty Reduction Work Group and the broader statewide plan to reduce poverty in our state. So EXA is a program that seeks to reduce poverty by integrating multiple services such as education, housing, food as part of one service delivery model. In 2019, EXA was piloted in 4 workforce regions of Washington State using the governor's WIOA discretionary dollars, and WIOA stands for Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. And then in 2021, the governor expanded EXA to all 12 regions, making it a statewide program. And it was here when it was launched in Seattle-King County by the WDC. In 2022, the Washington legislature appropriates $6.2 million to expand the EXA program. And in 2023, the legislature appropriates $200 million through the community reinvestment funds to support initiatives that directly impact the lives of Black, Indigenous, and Latinx individuals. $25 million of this funding was allocated to expand EXA. And then with these flexible dollars that we received by the legislature, we integrated the Guaranteed Basic Income pilot into our existing EXA program through a network of service providers who were also our WIOA service providers, which gave us the opportunity to provide for the first time direct cash payments to program participants. We started small. We started with 16 individuals. The pilot quickly expanded to using the state flexible dollars with support from JP Morgan Chase and King County as well. So within 1 year, our cohort grew to over 100 individuals, forming the basis of our evaluation. So with that introduction, I would like to now give the baton to Ganendra to further talk about how we implemented this project on the ground. So Ganendra, your turn.
Right. Thank you, Marisol, for that wonderful, setting the context for us and talking about how we got here. So I will go a little bit deeper into, why we are doing this work. And before that, I thought we could start with some questions. We did not have any icebreakers for you. Feel free to put that in the chat or just do some reflections on your own. But I'll put some questions here for you. So the first question that I was thinking is when you hear guaranteed basic income, what thoughts, impressions, or ideas come to your mind? if you could share that in the chat, that'll be great. But if you can, just take a note or things like that. So whatever works for you. So we are just wondering, when you hear the word, hear about guaranteed basic income, what thoughts or impression comes to your mind. I see Andrew Yang, stability and prevention. I see Alicia go too, but yeah, so feel free to share that in the chat. But I'll innovative, freedom to pay for things you need, income that allows a person to have funds that provide basic stability, how will we fund it at scale. So thank you so much. Less stress and anxiety. Yeah, please keep that coming, and then I will, I'll share the next question here. So when you are going to that list of things that came to your mind, like what, like there are things like if it's a um, it's a fact, opinion, some kind of like reflection, and what's the source of where that thoughts originated and things like that. We just wanted to politically controversial. So, okay, bootstrapping mindset. Yeah, thank you for sharing all that. And then I'm also looking at time, and we want to give a lot of time to Liz to share the evaluation. So I'll go quickly to the next question. And then, like if folks have any idea if the distinguish, how do you distinguish between GBI and by GBI I mean guaranteed basic income and universal basic income. So looks like I took a lot of time in the first question, so I will just give you the answers for the GBI versus universal basic income. GBI, there is some eligibility criteria, right? Versus universal basic income, if you're a resident of a certain country or certain location, by virtue of being a resident there, you'll be able to receive that funds. And I'm also assuming most of you know a little bit about guaranteed basic income, right? So it's that periodic monthly payments. So I'll not go into the details of that. With that, I will just go to the next slide. How our model is a little bit different than the current GBI pilots that's running in all over the United States. So we are a workforce board. So our ultimate goal is to help individuals and households become self-sufficient through basically employment and training. So what we offer our program participants, especially like Marisol talked about our economic security for all program, is we do offer like job counseling, job readiness, things like that. But we also help with individual training accounts. We pay for trainings or work-based learning and other support services. And for this GBI pilot, we provided $500 to folks. Along with that, we also provided, financial coaching, right? Like financial education with personal finance lessons, financial coaching, savings match in 2-to-1 savings match, and other benefits counseling. So our GBI pilot is a little bit different than the other pilots out there. I think we are more robust. With that, I'll go to the next slide. And why? You can see that we are offering all these things already. So why are we adding the $500 payments? And for that, we did the University of Washington did a study for us using the self-sufficiency calculator. And then what we found in that study is like families and households are working hard. Like 80% of the households below the self-sufficiency standard, and by self-sufficiency standard means like people are being able to cover all their basic needs without relying on public assistance, right? So 80% of those households had already one adult working. many, like 60% of them had some college, credentials. And then some folks, like almost half of them had kids, right? So that's another household. And all these things are also racialized, right? If 28% of King County residents are below the self-sufficiency standard, but like some communities have higher numbers, right? Like 45% of Latinx, uh, um, Black American Indians, and 36% of Hawaiian households struggle, like they're below the self-sufficiency standard. So let me go to the next slide quickly. Sorry about that. I was just looking at the time and trying to quickly go to the next slide. So I'll quickly describe our EXA model here. So where does GBI fit in our EXA model, right? So the economic security for all. So we already have all this, the economic security for all program running, but we also thought that, if somebody wants to go to that, careers that pays higher wage and that leads to a self-sufficiency career, we needed to provide more than just job training and things like that. So that's where we thought that providing that $500 could help people focus on those trainings, and also like give them the breathing space, so that they could focus on trainings to get those jobs that pay higher wages. So we did. This is our GBI. So I'm just trying to run a little bit quickly here, and then we have uh, the 3 Ps of ICSA. Uh, and I gave you some time to look at this map, and I could not explain it quickly enough. But that's how we were able to, help folks, overcome the benefits cliff and the opportunity cost of, taking that higher, taking that college courses or things like that. And then also, like, we wanted to make sure, like, GBI is just what do you call, uh, short-term, for immediate needs, but we needed something for long-term, and that's where we are also thinking about doing some IDAs and financial education. So we could not do this alone. We had a lot of partners involved in this process. So one of them is Applied Inference, who helped us with the research. And we also use the Atlanta Fed's Federal Reserve, Bank of Atlanta's CLIF dashboard. And we have other partners like our service provider partners, like we have ACRS, Neighborhood House, Track Associates, Pacific Associates, IRC, and others. And we also had some co-enrollments with our justice impacted program uh, providers like Chief Seattle Club, Community Passageways, Organization for Prostitution Survivors, and Track Associates again here. And we also did some financial education with YWCA's Money Mechanics, and we did ACR. We partnered with ACRs and Literacy Source to come up with a new financial coaching model called Managing Money in America. So we had lots of partners who helped us in this process, and with that, what I will do is, and also I forgot to mention, we had our funding partners here. So for this project, it was the JP Morgan Chase, and then the Employment Security Department, the Department of Commerce that's funding the next round, and then the King County VSHSL program. So with that, what I will do is I will pass it on to Liz to talk more about the evaluation, and also share some findings and insights that she has been able to collect through this project. So what I will do is I will stop sharing my screen, and I'll pass it on to Liz. Okay.
Am I sharing? Okay, let's see. There,
Yes,
is
we
it
can see.
working?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so first, before I dive into the data, I want to give you just a really short summary of what we're going to be talking about. So the big picture is that this project did make a difference in people's lives, and it was a difference that half of them pretty firmly believed that it would last beyond the period of the program. So the participants did make effective use of this monthly incentive, and depending on their circumstances, you know, like family type, or whether they were justice involved or DV survivors or students or newcomers to the country, they used the funds first for survival. And this made me think about Maslow's hierarchy, that basic level, and then for trying to move forward. So that made me think about the second level of the hierarchy. So some people were focused on building their financial security, or I guess everybody was probably focused on building their financial security, and they did it in different ways. Some used the funds to enable them to take more time in a job search, so they didn't have to accept the first and maybe low quality or short-term job that was offered to them. And some used it to be able to continue in a longer term training without having to choose between being housed or completing the training. And the impacts were wide ranging. So depending again on the participants' circumstances, the evaluation showed that with this incentive, people were able to meet more of their basic needs like food and housing, and they had improved health and well-being. They had improved financial situation. They were able to continue with or finish their long-term training, and others took the opportunity to start a shorter-term training. And people got better jobs with more money and more benefits. Okay, so it was a mixed method evaluations. We did pre and post surveys. We paid people $25 for the pre-surveys and $50 for the post surveys. We did focus groups and interviews, and we had access to some access to some administrative data. So this is just more methods. Let's start down here. We had, of those 103 people who were participants, we got pre-surveys from 83 of them and post-surveys from 56. The focus groups were intensive. We did a lot of different focus groups with 42 people and interviews with 9 each of the frontline staff and their supervisors. There are some limitations that I hope you'll keep in mind, data limitations. So I didn't have all the access I wanted to the administrative data. Employment was probably underreported. Without this administrative data, I had to rely on self-report from the surveys, and realizing that the financial incentives to participate in the surveys would probably be more attractive to people with more financial need. That could potentially introduce a negative bias, which would make these findings more conservative. So if people are making plenty of money, so the $50 didn't mean much to them, they might not respond. But so it would be a loss to not have them in the data. Okay, so very briefly, this is who participated. Ganendra mentioned the partners, the community partners that provided services to the clients. And I think, now I can't remember if you mentioned that there are 2 more cohorts underway now that are getting started. Most of the participants were BIPOC. The majority were women. People did have some higher education. However, recalling that the King County, I think King County's percentage is like 54% of people in King County have at least a 4-year degree. These folks do have less education than the general population. This shows you about their housing situation. A little more than half were living in market rate housing, and a pretty good chunk were homeless at the time that they enrolled. Family type turned out to be a pretty interesting variable. So these folks in the blue here on the wide side of the dotted line are childless households. The bigger segment is just single adults, and the smaller segment is households that had at least 2 adults. So the other wedge is parents, and this larger segment here are the single parents. So there's 28% of them, and each of these bigger wedges are subdivided by the age of their youngest child. So this group here, so SP is single parents, 10% of the single parents had children who were infants or preschool age, and these are the other groups. Okay, so the evaluation was sort of followed this bridge to self-sufficiency model that was developed by what used to be the Crittenden's Women's Union in Boston, and they are now Empath, and that is the name of this model. It's economic mobility pathways. So the idea is that there are these 5 pillars that hold up this bridge to self-sufficiency: family stability, well-being, financial management, education, and employment and career. So one of the things that's important here is that it's not just about getting a job. It's about having all of these aspects of a person's life functioning in order to be successful. So Ganendra, did you want to say something about the empath folks?
Yeah, so thank you, Liz. I was able to join the Empath Disrupting Poverty Conference in Boston earlier this year, and to keep things short, we are planning to have them come to Seattle to train our frontline staff on this on this model. So that's something we are looking forward to, and once that happens, maybe folks are interested, we can definitely share that information.
Thank you. So this presentation is going to be organized according to those 5 pillars. And so we'll start with family stability. And there we looked at how the money was spent and how people were doing with basic needs. So with regard to how the money was spent, notice that the top, let me start with how to interpret these in general. So you'll see a lot of graphs that look like this. The top bar is always going to be the data that came out of the pre-survey, and the second bar in each pair is always going to be data that came out of the post-survey. So in this case, the pre-survey was people responded to the question, how do you expect to spend this money? Because it hadn't started yet. And for the post-survey, it was, how did you spend this money? So the top 2 uses were basic needs, fixed expense like housing and utilities, or just a basic need like food, clothing. And the next 2 were about improving finances and security, catching up on debt, and trying to build a savings account. So one of the things that caught my attention was that the basic needs, more people ended up using the funds to meet these basic needs, and at the sacrifice of this, at Maslow's second layer, the one that builds safety and security. Okay, so I want to read out some of the voices of the people. All of these quotes are from participants, and they're verbatim. So someone said, it will make a huge difference. With the incentive, I will be able to pay for rent and utilities, as well as buy food for my family and myself, buy textbooks, and get back more time to focus on school and making my career a reality. So how did they do with their basic needs? This graph comes from questions that were asked, for example, in the past how often are you able to get enough food for your family's needs? And so the answers were from 1 to 5, 1 being never, maybe it was 0 to 4. Okay, now I can't remember, but the low end being never and the high end being always or almost always. So what this graph shows is the percentage who said always or almost always. So, and what the main findings here are that there was a an improvement on all of these. So the bottom bar is more people are saying they could always or almost always meet their needs after they started getting the funds than before. But the other thing to notice is that there are still a lot of people who get their basic needs met less than always or almost always, and these are basic needs. Okay, so that was the end of this section, and I want to pause to see if there are any comments or questions before we go on.
Yes, Liz, we do have a couple of questions in the chat. I think the first one is, any idea about more nuanced gender identity and LGBT status in the research?
Oh, I'm sorry, we didn't ask that question. So no, I think that's the only way we would know is if we asked. Is that right?
I believe so.
No, I'm sorry. Maybe let me write that down. Maybe we can add that into the next, the evaluation of the next cohorts.
And can we get a copy of the slides? Yes, we will put a copy on our website. Relatedly, does the bridge to self-sufficiency model takes into account social, societal structures and our cultural context? Question.
Uh-oh, Ganendra, I think that's you.
So, we just started, talking to Empath about this model. So that's why we want to learn more. So we are planning to get folks from Empath here or do some more learning around this bridge to self-sufficiency and also their mobility mentoring, framework. So we will be able to answer that questions. I think once we learn and start using that framework through our EXA model.
And Ganendra, maybe you can dive deeper. Attached to this framework is, I think, what ACRS did when they launched their financial coaching class, taking into account, immigrants and refugees.
Yeah, so primarily what we did was when we started the pilot, we also wanted to make sure like we had to have some kind of financial education alongside the GBI intervention. So we were working with the YWCA doing the 3-part series, which was the first one was the money mechanics, basics of personal finance. The second, after they graduate, there was a financial coaching piece, and then a 2-to-1 savings match. But we soon realized that there are some folks who are not able to access those because of language barriers and digital literacy issues, or the timing, things like that. So what we did with ACRS was like there are folks who they did not need financial education, but they needed more kind of like how does the financial system work in the United States. So we were quickly able to adapt and work with ACRS, and ACRS worked with I think we have Alex here, she can talk more, but they worked with Literacy Source, and they came up with I think a 3 or 4 in-person sessions, very focused on issues that came that were recommended by case managers that work for their clients. So it was in person also, and we called it Managing Money in America. So we were adapting as as we learn. So that's I think that's a really great way how we were able to first work with our providers and also make sure like everybody is getting like the kind of services catered to their needs.
Thank you. I would love to get feedback on the question. We are hoping that these issues, these questions will address the concern that some people might have that participants will squander the incentive. So I would love if you can put comments in the chat or just save them up for later. I'm going to run to the next section though. But I'm really interested in being able to address that question. So the next pillar was well-being, and for that we just asked people really about their well-being and their perceptions of health challenges. So in this one, we asked about general well-being, and the scale here went from terrible at 0 to excellent at 10. So for these, for example, we would ask in the last 2 weeks, how would you rate the social support in your life? And people gave a response, and then we averaged those. And so these numbers are the pre and post averages. So what we found was that people's perceived quality of life increased significantly. So with a pretty small n, these were statistically significant. Their ability to concentrate or focus increased. It didn't reach significance, but I think it might with a little bit more statistical power. And the ability to get around increased significantly. But I will say that when I wrote this question, I was thinking about physical mobility, but I think people might have answered in thinking about transportation. So what people said was, it has helped me calm down and breathe enough to look into my issues and handle them. It helped me a lot because I'm able to focus on myself and goals versus worrying about bills and expenses. It took the stress off me while going out and applying. So in terms of health challenges, the scale goes the opposite way this time. So these questions would be, in the past 2 weeks, how would you rate your feelings of anxiety? And so people would answer from 0, no problem at all, to 10, worst imaginable. And again, these are the averages. So looking at this, you can see that people were closer to worst imaginable in the pre-survey than in the post-survey. So this shows improvement, all along. The changes in pain and fatigue, pain management and fatigue increased significantly. They improved significantly, and the change in anxiety approached significance. So that's the end of the this pillar. Are there any other aspects of health and well-being that we should try to incorporate, or do you have any comments or questions? Is there anything?
Nothing in the chat.
Okay. So it made a tremendous difference, reduced debt, stress, and anxiety levels, and it made a big difference by helping me pay for some bills and take relief off stress. Okay, so the next pillar is financial management, and here we looked at bill payment, savings, debt situation and repayment, and what people identified as their financial goals. So we asked people, how often are you able to pay your required bills? We asked that pre and post, and these are their possible answers from almost always to rarely or never. So the percentage who said always or almost always doubled. That's a huge difference. And the percentage saying rarely or never dropped to almost none. So people said, I was job searching for 2 months. The stipend helped me stay on top of my bills while I found something stable. And getting the incentive was very helpful. I was able to pay some bills. In return, I built my credit score higher. So Ganendra, you're up at first here. Oh, can't hear you.
Yeah, we were doing a lot of kind of like research and things like that. So we found that like 69% of American households have less than $1,000 in savings, and 37% of American households cannot handle $400 emergency without borrowing. And then there's a very interesting finding. I don't know how many people have read the book, Psychology of Money. I find it very interesting where the author says that we as Americans, and then we saw that lottery recently, right? Like, we spend more money in lottery tickets than all the, the games and, I think movies and all those things put together. And then who buys those lottery tickets, right? And he says like, it's mostly like, it's the people who are low income. We spend more money on lottery tickets, and there's a reason for that. But I will I'll leave you with that thought. you know, and people who are on the, you know, like higher earners spend about $100 versus people who are low income. You know, they usually spend around like think over $400, and it's the same amount of money that folks cannot come during emergencies. So just wanted to leave you with that thought and pass it back to you, Liz.
Okay, thank you.
Liz, before you move on to this section, there is just some feedback here in the chat and a few questions. So do we have any insight into the debt bills the participants were paying off?
The type of bills, is that, let me think.
Or debt.
Well, the debt, yes, we'll get to the debt in a minute.
Okay. Do you mind going back one slide? It helps me for me to read through to process. So I think that one.
This one here?
Yes.
So was there a question?
I think they wanted just a little bit more time on that slide. Okay. And I'm going to read you this other. It could be interesting to also survey a participant's sense of community connectedness and belonging in comparison to feeling of isolation.
Great point.
Also,
community connection?
Yeah, in comparison to feelings of isolation.
Are we saving also, these chat comments?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, how can we help building support network? Can we help build a support network?
I think that's also a great question. And we'll have a little bit on that later.
It will also be good to know if they were able to pay for counseling or mental health assistance for individuals, families, kids, couples.
Okay, I can add
and
that.
Yes, wanted to know more about the types of bills people were paying, and I love this info and the data related to the post-survey results. That's it.
Okay, so let me see. Now I have to see where was I? Here. Okay, so savings. So I don't know if you remember back to one of the earlier slides that fewer people were able to build savings than expected, but the percentage with savings did increase from about a quarter to more than a third. And so that's just the complement of this. So these are the people who didn't have any savings. If we're looking only at the people who completed both surveys, so not everybody completed both surveys, but if we look only at the people who did, the increase was more dramatic, from 21% to 40%, for whatever that means. Among families with children, the percentage with savings, nobody with children had savings to begin with, and it was that 42% had at least something in savings at the end of this project. For single parents, it was only a third of single parents had savings at the end of the project. But and the amount saved increased, but I need to point out that these increases are pretty darn small. They do add up, but so it's not a huge dramatic effect, but it is in the right direction. Okay, here's the debt situation. So let me see if I can remember what I wanted to say about this. Oh, I remember. The when we started this, what I was expecting to see was that people would have less debt, but you can see from the from pre to post that people had more debt in the post survey. They had more car loans, more medical debt, and more credit card debt. So what we've done so far is we've added questions about dental debt for dental care, and so we may be able to sort that out a little bit. So what one person said is, from personal experience, this incentive helped me in many ways to jumpstart a career, helped me got a driver's license, then a used car, study English. And so again, these are verbatim comments. It helps me with vehicle payments, which I need to get to work. All right, so about debt repayment. So even though there was more debt repayment improved. So the percentage behind, which is these last three pairs of bars, on at least one debt or worse, decreased from 65% before to 54% in the post survey. So that's an improvement. Again, it's not a dramatic improvement, but it's an improvement. correspondingly, the percentage that was current on all their debts, or maybe even ahead on at least one, increased from 35%, so from about a third to about half. So someone said, we're going into debt each month just to make rent. This will make an opportunity to focus on getting done with school and back on our feet. It helped me clear up a lot of my credit, my bills I had accumulated. This is helping me pay that off. When the program ends, my debt situation will be better. So the financial goals issue I thought was really important. I gave people a list of things that might be their financial goals and then gave them an other, so that for the things I hadn't thought of, and they just endorsed whether this was a financial goal for them or not. So you can see that the top half is dominated by establishing and maintaining financial security. And that there were, since the top bars are pretty much longer than the bottom bars in each pair, that means that more financial goals were identified in the pre-survey than in the post-survey. And the one big exception to that was home ownership. There were a whole bunch more people who were focused on home ownership at the end than at the beginning. So single parents stood out in this way. So, I mean, take a look at these numbers. So in the pre-survey, even in the pre-survey, these are single parents. 75% identified home ownership as an important financial goal compared to 39% of everybody else. In the post-survey, they were still, dramatically, everybody moved up in the post-surveys, and the difference persisted. There was also a big difference in college training and training goals for themselves. So in the pre-survey, only 13% of the single parents identified that as an important goal for themselves, compared to 44% of other people. And I want to call your attention down here to paying or saving for children's education. Of course, this would only be people with children, but you'll see that was pretty high. It was higher than wanting to get education for themselves. But by the post-survey, these single parents jumped up. Everybody else decreased, and I'm not sure why that is. It might be because they got their the training they were after, so it was no longer a goal. But my hypothesis about these single parents is that, at first it wasn't their additional training wasn't even on their radar. It was survival that was on their radar. But once they got a handle on survival, then they were able to, move up one level. So, Ganendra, did you want to say something about how this connected with the UW study? You don't have to. I just thought you might.
No, I mean, like, we again, this is the first cohort, and then if you see the demographic breakdown earlier, like we had almost like 50-50 split between households with kids and households without kids, but the UW report, the overlooked and undercounted, reveal that and it's we all know that families with kids might might be more vulnerable to poverty. So I think as parents, I think they have a tendency to take care of the kids and family first. But I think with the GBI pilot, now the parents are in a position to think about themselves and think about their careers and make those make those goals, which will eventually help their kids in the long run, right? So that's something I wanted to share.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I would like to, if I were queen of the world, I would like to make the single parents program a little longer, so that once they are ready to start thinking about their own program, they have the support to do it. But I wanted to be sure to get to address any questions. This was the end of this section, to address any questions that we can about this. And I also wanted to know if if the people listening who have more experience have some other interpretation of this data.
I can tell you what's in the chat. So could the increase in debt be because now they have access to goods and services they couldn't even take credit for previously?
Yes, and people did actually said that. They said things like getting this, having this income helped them qualify for loans that they wouldn't have qualified for before.
I'm curious about the impact of GBI for the well-being and long-term outcomes of children whose parents receive GBI.
I'm curious about that too.
Yeah.
We're
also curious about long-term evaluation, right?
Yeah, that's a plan.
Yes. And
really
I
interesting
think,
findings. Oops, go ahead, Ganendra.
No, I just like with the kids thing, like there's this lots of, I know like Brian is here with ESG, like a lot of economists. I think that there are theories, right? Like we're, and again, like, it's a little bit tangential, but I think it's very related to this. Like, income inequality is increasing, right? Like now, social mobility, right, is those two are not like they're negatively correlated. By that, what I mean is like the social mobility, right? Like our immobility goes up with income inequality, right? Like when society gets more unequal, folks on the bottom rung of the income ladder, it's harder for them to climb that. And I think that's called the Great Gatsby curve. And then, like where you are born, that plays a very important role, because now, that parents cannot spend on the human capital of their kids. So definitely, I think like if we improve that for the parents, I think that will translate into kids. But it's just a theory. But I think like, like Liz said, we all are very interested in learning more about this, and we are planning to do a follow-up. But that's something we wanted to share later. But the context was right. Just share it right here. Okay, back to you, Liz, and or
one more.
Oh.
It is hard to link children to parents specifically when they become adults, but research I am familiar with shows positive outcomes of cash transfer programs on children even when they become adults.
Okay.
And then can you explain again what the post-survey questions were looking for? Was it to see if their priorities had changed after taking the survey?
Well, let me see. It was just because we asked at the beginning, and so that's why I just repeat questions from the pre-survey to the post-survey. And what I thought we would be interested in is just what are the financial goals of people. And I would like to say I had a hypothesis that the goals would somehow be different, but I didn't. I didn't have a particular hypothesis.
And one last comment here. Really interesting findings on the debt situation. Does research point to the increase in debt translates to new debt incurred during the program? I think you answered that earlier. So yes.
Yeah, and I just want to say one thing. In a previous WDC project, parents who were in school volunteered the comment frequently about how they were inspiring their children to work harder in school because the children saw the parents doing it. So, okay, let's go on to education and training. So for this, we looked at progress on their career plans and barriers to progress. So there were just two requirements for participants. They had to have a career plan and they had to make monthly contact with their case manager. So this graph shows that most people were engaging in most parts of their career plan, except for that long-term training, which is a shame because that's the training that's really going to help people make that jump out of poverty, or at least in less poverty. So people said, well, I would usually put all my time and effort into working and paying bills. I've been able to take some time to get signed up for schooling, take small certification courses, helping me to become more qualified for positions of my interest. So the next graph is yours, Ganendra. This is the North Seattle College.
Okay, thank you. And a lot of people affiliated with North Seattle College. It looks like you cannot chime in, so I am going to take this one. So we have a partnership with North Seattle College. We work with particularly like 3 different programs. 2 programs is like the Bachelor's of Applied Science in Computer Science and application development, and we do work with some students in the nursing program. And as you can see in the slide, we have been working with I don't know if Steve joined us today, but we have been working with Steve Ballo at North Seattle College prior to launching this GBI pilot. And some of the reasons, like the students were leaving their programs, he shared with us was like funding, right? Work, like they needed to work more hours, family needs. And I think we'll cover some of these later on when Liz is talking about those priorities. Um, so, we after we partnered with North Seattle College, I can share one example, and I think Liz will share that with the group too later on. I don't want to steal Liz's thunder, but we were able to support students. Say, for example, somebody in the nursing program, went through like 3/4 of the GBI pilot. He was in the CNA job for about almost 5 or 6 years, was not able to complete his clinicals, and then he was able to afford to go to school, take care of the family, and then complete the training, and then complete his ADN program at North Seattle College. And then, now he's, successfully employed as a nurse, making, I think, over $40 an hour. I think that was the thing that I was trying to show at the impact map earlier.
You
So
are stealing my thunder.
Sorry, Liz. but I could not it was too good. Like I think you can share this story multiple times, and it's a really important thing. That's the kind of thing that we were trying to do, right? There's like competing priorities, right? Like we had the 3 A's, like we can provide all the support, but still, like there's an opportunity cost of going to school, so which we were able to manage or mitigate through the $500 monthly amount that we paid. And if you see now, everybody who's enrolled in the GBI pilot at North Seattle College, according to, and this is an independent research outside of Liz's and our work, reported to us by North Seattle College, looks like so far the completion and retention rates for students who participated in the GBI pilot is 100%. So we supported, I think, 7 students in the first cohort. 2 of them graduated, five of them are continuing, and we also added 10 more. So I think we have 14 or 15 students currently in the 3 programs that's receiving the $500. And everybody has not, we were able to retain those students. But yeah, that's something I wanted to share. But I think folks from Track Associates also here. I just want to recognize their work working with the students there. But looks like you cannot talk, so I think I covered enough.
Well, I want to just to really underscore that students who don't have this support, it's a 50 to 55% completion rate, and it's doubled when they get some support. So those competing priorities or competing commitments are powerful. So this next question, I asked people what they anticipated might interfere with their ability to complete whatever it was they were trying to do. And then in the post survey, I asked what did interfere. So there were some things that the percentage was the same. About half the people said that the cost of education, just the cost of the tuition and the books and so on, would prevent them from being able to succeed. I'm not sure they're correct about that, but the same percentage thought it before, early and late. But there were some underestimated barriers, and it was the competing demands. So the need to work to support the family, the time conflict, need to care for their children, and for some people, family and friends, the needs to help family and friends. And the thing, well, let's go to this. The other category was inadequate support. So that's where, transportation problems, people didn't anticipate. Quite a few people didn't anticipate the transportation problems they were going to have. Some people had a concern over loss of benefits and problems with childcare. So to me, of course, these barriers are important, but as important is the fact that people aren't ready for them. People did not correctly anticipate that this would be a problem, so they couldn't plan for them. So I thought that was important. There were a few overestimated barriers. Some people thought that they weren't ready academically, but that didn't turn out to be the case for most. And some thought that their health would get in their way, and that also wasn't quite as prevalent as they were afraid it would be. So the last pillar is employment and career, and there we looked at change in employment, change in earnings, and benefits. So this first bar here represents the percentage of people who were employed when they entered EXA. Then some months or later, maybe some years later, I'm not sure, this is the percentage of people who were employed when they completed the pre-survey. So they'd been in EXA for a while. And this is a percentage of people who were employed when they in the post survey. And so this is going to be important later. So of these people, some of them got a new job after they had started receiving the monthly checks, and some were still in their old jobs. So that's going to be important later. Remember it. So some people said, I went from living right at the poverty line to bringing home $2,400 every 2 weeks. It was a massive difference. I'm able to pay $1,500 a month toward my debt now. And someone else said, I finished my training and now I can look for a job without a bunch of side hustles. I don't need to search for just any job. And I actually talked to somebody who was doing the current survey, and she suggested adding a question about gig work, which we've done. So we'll have that information coming up. So for monthly salary, this is the employment of that the wages or the monthly income of the 21% who were employed when they enrolled in EXA. And this is the average monthly income of people at the end of the project. So you can see a giant increase there. And this is the increase. There was even an increase in wages between people who got their job before receiving the funds and after receiving the funds. So it isn't just about wages. Benefits are also really important. And the people who are in a new job are much more likely to have benefits. And Ganendra pointed out that a large percentage, more than a third of American households don't even have a retirement account. And so this is a huge benefit. So someone said, I've got a better job with more potential for higher pay than at my old job. And that's, oh, I should have asked here, is there anything, this is the end of this section. So were there any comments or questions?
There are a few comments regarding the Maslow hierarchy of needs. Just somebody posting screenshot there, but I don't see any questions. Just
okay,
appreciative of the information.
I would like to know, if you guys can think about this, is there anything else that I'm missing about employment? Anything else we should be asking about employment? So that's something I hope you can give feedback on. Okay, possible objections. So will people use the money well? Will it just be squandered? So I think we answered that early on. Is this a disincentive to work? Some people were concerned about that. And will these effects last? So that's part of the reason we're doing that follow-up survey. So is it a disincentive to work? Survey respondents didn't think so. They about 80% disagreed, and more than half strongly disagreed. Okay, and the facts disagree. More people were working after receiving the GBI than before. And that was probably conservative because some were still in training, as Ganendra pointed out, or they were just out of training and hadn't started their jobs yet. And there was that negative bias in the data, the conservative bias that I mentioned early on, that probably underreports the amount of employment. So informant said that, $500 a month just isn't enough. It leaves enough responsibility with the participants, and so that prevents it from being a disincentive. They said that the support stabilizes participants with their basic needs, enabling them to conduct a extensive job search. And the support relieved that sense of desperation, so participants weren't forced to accept low quality jobs. So I was thinking, well, it's a disincentive to work in low quality jobs. So here are some of the things that people said in their own words. The monthly incentive is not a livable amount of income. Instead, it is a stepping stone, allowing participants additional time and space throughout the month to focus on gaining wages and jobs in programs of interest. It gives us an incentive. Let me take this 10 months to focus on getting a job I can keep instead of getting part-time jobs here and there. For me, I was going from job to job to job. For me and my son, this is long-term. My job search has been long but beneficial. Being in this program has allowed me to believe in myself more and build on my resume to obtain jobs in a field of my interest instead of some random job. I don't need to search for just any job. I can find a stable job that I could stick with to build that foundation with a foundation of a certain income I'm not accustomed to getting. So will the impacts last? 44 people answered this question in a way that I could code. So this was in open-ended questions. So 50% just said a clear yes, that the impacts will last. And 16% added that it was due to what they learned in their money management program. And 14% said it was due to a new and better job. A third said that, yeah, they would probably just revert to how things were before they got the incentive. And 10% said something that amounted to, I'll hope for the best. So some of their specific comments were, life has changed throughout the program. I'm on track of paying for my house, my living expenses, and have a good job. Someone else said, yes, this incentive is helping me budget my financial expenses and time. And finally, this program set me up to be successful. I have a legitimate career that will be starting in 1 month. I will be fully able to stand on my own 2 feet for the rest of my life. The program helped me complete school and get a job lined up afterwards. And this is a quote from the person that Ganendra stole from me. So I just want to say a few other things about him. So he was a single father with half custody of his teenage kids. And he had been a CNA for 5 years in end-of-life care. And he'd been working for 7 years to try to become a nurse, to get to this last 3 quarters. And he explained, and he had been a search and rescue volunteer for 10 years before that. So he explained that with his CNA salary, he could barely support them with the combination of the CNA salary and student loans and credit cards, even with the post-COVID rent increases. But he was able to do that through the prereqs and early nursing school. But the last 3 quarters of nursing school, he explained, were the hardest, with 2 full days of clinicals. He just couldn't work enough hours as a CNA to pay for rent and go to school. So he chose homelessness to be able to stay in school. And 11 of the people in his cohort of the 24 all didn't choose homelessness. They continued to work, and they were not able to progress into the final 2 quarters. That's almost half of his cohort. So for 5 months while he was in nursing school, he lived on a friend's boat, except when he had his kids, and then he lived on a friend's couch. So the EXA allowed him to reduce his work hours to 15 to 20 hours. And now he is working as an RN at Swedish Hospital in Edmonds in the emergency department. And, he's very successful and loving the work, and they love him. So this is the end of this section. Any comments or questions? And do you think that this answers the objections that people might have? What other concerns should we be thinking about?
As people think through that question, I think we have, is there any information about participants being in unions? ?
I didn't ask about unions. But
We'd love to
but this person is in a union. That he mentioned that.
And that's something that we can dive deeper into, like,
Yes.
employment data. We'd love to see more about what type of employment, what people are counting as being employed, especially self-employment, gig economy, work, etc. How many jobs people are working? Do they have 1, 2 jobs, 3 jobs? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. And we did make that change. The first few people who have filled out the pre-survey for the current evaluation didn't get that question, but they will now. And also, there's a question about whether they're required to have a business license to work.
Yeah, and yes, Swedish in Edmonds, SEIU 1199 Northwest member.
Thank you.
I think it's very hard. This is a comment. I think it's very hard for people who haven't experienced poverty to really understand the nagging stress and psychological impact of not being able to pay bills. If we relieve that stress with something like GBI, it frees them up to dream and pursue their goals.
That is one of the things that really struck me in this evaluation. I talked to so many people, and I think there is the idea out there that when people just have no way of paying their bills, they're just like, oh, well, I won't pay my bills. But when I talked to these people, they were working so hard to pay their bills and just trying to catch up and sort of join the part of society that was successful in paying their bills. They were really committed. So should we move to conclusions?
Yes.
Okay. So in this section, I want to go through just summarize the findings again, because I think, you just swallowed a big mouthful of data. Talk about how we think it worked, some lessons learned, and some recommendations. So a reminder, we use this bridge to self-sufficiency model. So in family stability, people had improved basic needs. In well-being, people had improved quality of life, ability to get around, reduced pain, fatigue, and anxiety. With financial management, they had improved debt repayment, improved bill payment, slightly improved savings, and more debt, specifically these 3: car loans, credit card, and medical. In education and training, most followed their career plan, except for long-term training. And I think the issue there is what we've been talking about, just the inability to pay for your life and support your kids while you're meeting the demands of a long-term training program. But this funding, people said the funding did allow them to stay in school. And career and employment. More people were employed, they had higher incomes, they had more benefits, they were more stable, and the funds helped them get those better jobs. Okay, so what do we think? How do we think this happened? Was it just the money? Well, part of it was the money. So what that did was stabilize people with their basic needs and led to reduced stress and anxiety. The income also replaced the income that was lost to school responsibilities, and it allowed more time for a job search to get that quality job. And that hasn't anticipated this lasting impact. So the monthly check-ins turned out to be really important. I asked people how they felt about them, and honestly, I was expecting people to say that they were sort of a nuisance or a burden or something like that, but almost every single one said how much they appreciated those monthly check-ins. They felt like somebody cared. They felt like it gave them some accountability. And the case managers said that it really helped them, that more frequent contact helped them detect barriers faster so that they could address them more quickly. And the financial literacy was the other component that seemed to really make an impact. It led to improved financial management. Most people who participated said that they could apply what they learned and that they could manage their money better, and half took advantage of the matched savings option. So we're getting to the final stretch here. Some of the suggestions were definitely continue the connection with workforce programs, definitely keep those workaround services. They were important to people's success. Continue those monthly check-ins with case management. But what about the incentive itself? So this is kind of the big question. Well, is $500 the right amount? Is 10 months the right duration? Are equal payments the best pattern, or is there something else that would be a better pattern? Should it be the same for everybody? And is guaranteed income even the best approach? So we asked people in both the survey and the focus group about the amount and the duration of the incentive. And so these are the results for the focus group participants. And I was surprised to see that half said keep it at 500. And so I divided this into 4 different groups. So here's just the single adults. Here are single parents. Oh, I'm on the wrong line. So here are the single adults. Here are single parents. These are parents who have a little more support. Maybe it's a 2-parent household, or maybe they live with their own parents. It's a multi-generational, or maybe they're employed. So these were their responses, and these were the responses of the few people with a large family. So you can see that most people, about half, said to keep it at 500. Some gave other options. It was about, I don't know, it was about a quarter that said a little bit more. So let's see what people said. Keep the amount at 500. This was in the survey, so about the same percentage, about the same responses in the surveys. Someone said, I think it was the amount was good. Too much would allow people to get too comfortable and not work hard. And someone else said, keep it at 500. I think it's not big or not small, not big in terms of like too much that I can spend other things. It's the right amount where I can spend and use less and save, but 10 months are too short. So again, about a quarter said to raise the amount, especially for families, for larger families. And many people felt that the duration was too short. You can see that that's a pretty 35% of the focus group people, and probably about the same. 38% from the survey said that 10 months was the right length. So most people thought it should be longer. I think everyone can say that this has motivated them to not only move forward more for the next 10-month period, but to get themselves straight financially too, because they know it's not going to last long. Okay, so the general consensus was that too much or too long can create dependency. So here was some flexibility, some program flexibility that interviewees and participants came up with. Maybe different amounts depending on circumstances. So family structure, single parents, single person, larger family. For justice-involved adults, some re-enter society with resources, some without, some in debt. Maybe make it different for someone who has a lot of barriers versus someone who has a few, whether somebody is employed or a student or a job seeker. The person, it was actually the nurse that made this suggestion to consider adjusting the time or the amount depending on the program demands. So some people thought, well, maybe case by case. For some people, 12 equal payments. For some people, a lump sum at the beginning, like especially if they're homeless or something, to help them stabilize and then give the balance over time. For a few people would have really appreciated the lump sum, the whole thing up front, because they wanted to start a small business or they had a big amount of debt to pay off. One person wanted it for education to pay for their master's program because they were no longer eligible for student loans for their master's program. And a case manager, thought that some of their customers might do better with a 3-month program that could be extended. or maybe a different approach, adding something to the salary, including maybe adding up to self-sufficiency, or matching car payments. And something that occurred to me was doing something different for people in different subgroups. So people at the finish line, students with low income who are in the final years of their demanding training program, because just too many fail at that crucial time because of having to work too many hours at low wage jobs. And that to me is the trap into poverty. And parents and single parents, so they initially are focusing on their survival needs and only later begin to consider their own education. So what's next? We're planning the follow-up evaluation with this group, and there are 2 more cohorts going with an expanded evaluation, including, I'll add some of the questions that have been suggested here. And so we want to know from you, either verbally, if verbally is possible, or in the chat, or you can connect with me later. This is my contact information. What do you think of this use of funds? Is this, a worthy investment? What ideas do you have for improving the model? Maybe there are things that we haven't thought of. What information from this presentation, if any of it, was useful or new or important or compelling? What do you think is important? And just what are we missing? So finally, it's your turn with questions, comments, discussion. And I'm going to have finished my water. Oh, I have to unshare. Should I unshare? If I can.
Maybe, really quick, would it make sense for me to let everybody come off of mute at this time? I'm seeing some head nods. Okay, so I'm gonna.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, great.
So I think I've stopped sharing, right?
Yes.
Liz, there are a few, I think, questions, comments in the chat, starting from, let's see. In regards to the 33% who said life will return to how it was before the program, is there any info on how that specific group voted on incentive amount, program length?
No, I didn't think to look at that. Let me see. Can I? Yes, I think I can. That's a really great question. Let me see. I have to figure out how to remind myself to try to figure it out.
I wonder if and how tying GBI to a workforce program has different impacts from other GBI programs that do not have that workforce aspect. Does the workforce aspect amplify certain outcomes? Question.
Yeah, I think that's a question for you guys. For me, it looked like it, considering what we thought were the mechanisms of action.
I think so too. I feel like having the wraparound support, having the funds available that are separate from GBI, so training dollars, rental assistance, transportation support, but the case management and that coaching and having someone that, you can talk to and go over, your goals and aspirations and have someone that can be there for you, I think it's crucial in terms of the success and the outcomes that we've seen. Let's see. Those with learning disabilities may need more support. Was this taken into consideration? Was there a disability question?
Let me think. There is now in the new one. There wasn't in the old one, but I agree. I think it's very important. And because I think that's sometimes how people end up in this poverty situation.
I am also curious about groups. Oops, go ahead, Ganendra.
No, just wanted to share that we have, I think Jan has joined from Pacific Associates. We have providers that are now, like focusing on providing more access or services to, to folks with disabilities to, get into our GBI pilot. So we are taking that. We learned from the first cohort, so.
I am also curious about groups who may be excluded with a workforce focus, low-income seniors, people with disabilities, and possibly others. I would say the program doesn't exclude because everybody that is low income that wants that wraparound support, wants to, get a better job, can qualify for EXA. And I think that's an EXA, includes people that is impacted by poverty. And once you are in the EXA program, there is the opportunity for individuals to join the GBI pilot through a randomization process. So that includes people with disabilities, older workers, in a wide variety of participants. Anything else that you want to add, Kanendra, to that comment question?
I do.
Yeah, go ahead, Liz. Go first.
There were two people that I talked to. So a lot of those focus groups were one-person focus groups. And so two of them disclosed a disability. One said he was trying to heal from it, but it was probably going to be 7 or 8 years before he could actually rejoin the workforce as a barber. And the other person said that she didn't think she would ever be able to rejoin the workforce. So honestly, from my perspective of counting people, counting how many got jobs, I thought, is this, these are not going to be adding to that. This is going to put a limit on how many people will be able to report employment.
From Jackie, could be interesting to compare to other more embraced workforce development strategies like job centers or financial literacy programs without GBI. To do a comparison with other programs.
Would you repeat that? I didn't understand.
So could be interesting to compare to other more embraced workforce development strategies like job centers or financial literacy programs without GBI.
Absolutely. I would love a comparison group. I think we should work on that.
I work in the construction industry, and it will be interesting to understand impact to individuals in apprenticeship, journey status, etc.
Yeah, do you recall in that figure about the career plan that I thought that apprenticeships were also a little bit underrepresented? I mean, the people who had apprenticeships as one of their goals, I think it was about a third, and 23% were actually able to engage in apprenticeships.
Yeah, one of our cohorts right now with the Filipino community of Seattle, 10 participants impacted by the criminal justice systems are doing kind of a micro apprenticeship in telecommunications and broadband installation. And I think that's kind of part of the effort, like that map that you saw Ganendra present earlier is really how do we also create some intentional partnerships to make sure that, we are casting a wide net in terms of people that can join the GBI pilot. Jan said that we appreciate asking about disability because they are our focused target group for Pacific Associates. I don't understand Liz's comments. Is she saying that including persons with disabilities will decrease employment rates? Question mark.
Yes, if they are people who don't intend to become employed. But
Okay.
not necessarily. There's plenty of people with disabilities who are employed.
Yeah, I just kind of take exception. I mean, obviously, anybody will decrease your employment rates if they don't intend to be employed, but I wouldn't call out persons with disabilities as being more or less likely to be in that group.
Right. They were the only people who, in the interview process or the focus group process, actually said that.
Okay.
And then Katsini, I'm curious if similar GBI installment payment pilots have been implemented with youth, either in combination with education related to workforce readiness, entrepreneurship, and or investment focuses, or separately to observe their financial behaviors independently of their parents. Thank you for this incredible analysis and discussion.
So we, in the third round of our pilot, like we haven't tried that, but we are planning something, but we haven't done anything with the youth yet, Marisol.
There might be an opportunity for us because within the EXA, there are individuals that, will meet the youth criteria too. So potentially there's one way to kind of also maybe take a look at the age bracket
Yes.
and kind of maybe do some analysis there too. Yeah. And people are welcome to come off mute if you want to ask, questions, but I don't see anything in the chat.
Really quick, going back, you may have answered this one, but I think I missed it. So there's a question from someone with Track Associates. How long after the end of the GBI is employment income measured?
How long after the GBI was employment what?
How long after the end of the GBI are we measuring the employment income?
Pretty much right at the end.
Okay.
But that's part of our goal for the follow-up, because I know there were people who were about to get a job, they were waiting on their job to start. So I think the figures will change if we can do the follow-up.
And I think we'll take Nick's question and I think we'll wrap up.
What were the costs per client, I guess, is the right participant of the additional components above and beyond the $500 a month? Is there a sort of monthly figure or an overall figure for what those additional costs were for counseling, et cetera, et cetera? Just trying to figure that out as we sort of try to compare apples to apples to different GBI models that have been piloted or implemented.
I think that's probably you, Andrea.
Sure. So I think the beauty of our model is we like whatever was, so we did not, what I'm trying to say is we leverage our existing programs and infrastructure. So all those other things that we were able to provide to our participants did not incur additional costs. We are able to leverage some funds like, the 2-to-1 savings match with the YWCA. So we did not incur any additional cost. We were able to use our existing system like the WIOA and the EXA model. So we did not incur any additional costs. So whatever we,
and I will,
yeah, go ahead.
No, and I would say that we added this to EXA. EXA already existed, so this
Yes.
became an additional part of our EXA service delivery model. So we already had the EXA infrastructure in place, and we already had the community partners who are running this on the ground in partnership with the WDC. So most of the money has gone directly to the pockets of participants, which has allowed us to kind of be able to expand this at a very rapid pace because we're utilizing that infrastructure that is already there.
Yes.
Awesome, thanks.
And then the closing.
Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us. Like we really appreciate you all giving us your time. If you have any questions, like feel free to reach out to Liz. I had another slide deck just to provide our name and contact information, but I think you will be able to just reach out to anybody here at the WDC. Yeah. Thank you so much. But also I wanted to, recognize a few names like, like our funders, like, the folks from ESD are listening today, the EXA program, our leadership, Murray, is here, for, trusting us with this pilot, all our provider partners, like I saw a lot of them today here, and then, Liz for doing this wonderful, evaluation for us, Joe and Anna for coordinating this. And then, I need to recognize Marisol because I think this is her idea. And then, we were able to make it happen. With that, I think I covered everyone. If I missed anyone, I want to thank everyone and hopefully support us. We want, more funding for this program. We want to expand. Thank you for the question, Nick. We would just whatever funds we get, it's going directly to our program participants. So we are looking for more funding to expand this work.
And we want to test the lump sum. We actually want to do lump sums.
Yes.
We can't right now because of the kind of funding that we have, but if we have more flexible funding, we can actually do lump sums.
All right. With that, thank you everyone for joining us today and have a great rest of the day. And
Thank you.
keep in touch with us. Thank you, everyone.